Hi everyone, welcome to the very first internally screening podcast. My name's Adam.
I'm Rupert.
And this is basically, I guess, just us, just two British chaps talking about films and shit. Because there aren't enough people on the internet doing that already. But hopefully we can be interesting enough and potentially charismatic enough for it to carry ourselves into a fruitful YouTube career.
Who knows? And strange things have happened. So in this episode, we're going to talk about just one bit of news that I found interesting. I think is generally just quite interesting, and we're going to talk about two films. We're going to talk about the first one we're going to talk about it's going to be Extraction, the 2020 Netflix film with Chris Hemsworth, just because. As I'm sure you're all aware, nothing much is out except stuff that's streaming, and a lot of the stuff that was going to be out is now out on streaming only. So the rivers of film content are running kind of dry, and we're all kind of relying on Netflix, which is, as you all know, probably not the most ideal situation to be in if you like films.
I love this idea. Sorry, just to cut in. I love the idea that at the end of the year, that Bad Boys for Life is like the highest grossing film.
Yeah,
just
and the Oscar goes to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Just because nothing else fucking came out.
Yeah, I know. And people seem to like that film, which I just wasn't expecting. Anyways, so the first bit of news we're going to talk about is the fact that maybe the greatest twist reveal in real life ever, which is that Zack Snyder's the legendary rumoured Snyder Cut of Justice League is actually gonna come out. So for anyone unaware, I guess most people are probably kind of sort of aware of this, but Justice League wasn't very good, and
to put it mildly,
and wasn't just compromised by the studio interference, was actually compromised by an entirely separate director coming in and kind of reshooting a lot of the film, and the film was also meddled with on a studio level to boot. So which kind of, I mean, the few fans that were left in the DC camp were kind of upset by this, as you'd imagine. And I don't know, when did Justice League come out?
Oh, like 2017, 2018?
Yeah, I mean, it's
2 or 3 years back.
So for like 2 or 3 years, people have been campaigning, primarily on Twitter, obviously, for a hashtag ReleaseTheSnyderCut, in hopes that they would see, an actual version of Justice League, one that wasn't tainted by Joss Whedon coming in and rewriting and reshooting a lot of it. Joss Whedon, obviously. An ex-Marvel director who, because the tribalism between Marvel and DC obviously doesn't look good. It's
amazing they even got him on board at all. Like, I understand, like, DC were desperate to have the same hit potential that Marvel had, but to get Joss Whedon on when your fan base is that aggressively loyal, it just seems like shooting yourself in the foot right out of the gate.
Yeah, because everybody who likes DC seems to like DC as a reaction to not liking the Marvel films and how quippy they are. And Joss Whedon seems to represent the two most dated elements of the Marvel films, that being that he shoots stuff like it's a TV show, kind of flat, right? And
for sure.
TV-ish and kind of sitcom-ish. Like, if you watch The Avengers, it's kind of like a sitcom with all the characters just quipping at each other. And then the other 100%. Thing is his writing is super quippy, and most of the humour is like almost interjection and sort of ironic humour that some people don't seem to really gel with. And the whole idea of the DC universe was no, this is serious and philosophical. So it didn't make sense to bring him in. How do you feel about the idea? How do you feel about the idea of actually seeing this? Because it's going to be released on HBO, and apparently it could potentially be like 4 hours long.
Well, okay. Here's the thing. I think a lot of critics before us have said it, but I feel like with this new news, it needs to be reiterated. Justice League was never a good film. Like, if you stripped away the quippy dialogue that they forced in, the reshot scenes and all the extra bits that clearly had Joss Whedon's fingerprints all over them, the fundamental story and the character arcs of everyone, it just didn't make for a very compelling film at all.
Yeah.
Which was made very apparent when you had films that came after it or before it, like Wonder Woman and Aquaman, that made those two characters so much more colourful and interesting and engaging. And then you have Justice League, and they barely do anything. They're so flat and grey and boring. Ben Affleck is so dull and tedious as Batman, where in Batman v Superman, everyone was singing his praises for being like the one tolerable element of that film.
The problem with Ben
in
Affleck...
Justice League, it flips the other way, right? Like, he is... he's so...
It looks like he's like eyeing the exit to the set and everything.
Yeah, he's so aware of what he's become part of.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, the core problem is that, I mean, not only was Justice League not a good film in all of the core elements, I think the idea that Zack Snyder actually has this secret version that he was making that was actually great is completely wrong, because we have to remember that Justice League was being made post Batman vs Superman, and Batman vs Superman was a huge commercial disappointment, and people hated it for the most part. I know it's kind of been reevaluated with the Ultimate Edition and whatnot, but people didn't like it, and the studio execs were already interfering with Zack Snyder as he was shooting it before he exited the project. So what Zack Snyder had already shot is already a compromised vision. There is not going to be a version of this where it's going to be 100% what he wanted, because they're putting 20 million into 20 million plus into this, which I assume is going to go into effects, color recolor grading stuff, and ADR, and maybe some reshoots, right?
The reshoots are going to be... That's the thing I would question the most. Like, surely they've got to do that. But loads of actors have exited it. Like Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck have both, cut ties with the whole project. So how are you going to convince those people to come back? Because, like you say, basically, Zack Snyder seemed to record, I don't know, let's say 3/4 of the film. That still leaves him with a quarter of film left that he has to do.
Yeah.
And how exactly is he going to recut?
And there were already fairly extensive reshoots, from what I understand, during his phase directing the film, helming the film.
Right.
So, I mean, and I know for big projects they do reshoots. Like every Marvel film has a lot of reshoots, but we can assume that the producers probably weren't happy with what they'd seen from Zack Snyder, because, I mean, I personally, I'm not a fan of Zack Snyder. I think he's talented, but I mean, I don't believe that he was coming up with something so radically better than Batman vs Superman in Justice League, in the first Justice League shoots, that was gonna blow the executives away or anything like that. I think it was probably flawed from the outset. But I mean, ultimately, I am kind of glad that we're going to get to see this, because even if I'm not particularly invested in the Marvel DC rivalry, and I'm not that into Zack Snyder as director, I have seen a bunch of his films, and I always think it's a good thing if a director gets a bit more on something he was clearly very passionate about. I don't think he ever lost. I don't think it's not like Joss Whedon, who did very quickly lose his passion for the Avengers following one sequel. I think he genuinely believed in the DCEU universe thing and was really into helming it, and the fact that he had to exit under such awful circumstances, obviously not good.
Awful, yeah.
But I mean, and I am basically glad that we're going to get to see this next year. But
I think I agree with you on an artistic level, with one man and his vision. I'm all for it. Like, and ultimately it doesn't affect me if it comes out or not. Like, I'm not going to slam it down just for the sake of that.
Yeah.
I'm just criticizing and questioning the angle that like this Snyder Cut was ever going to be this golden,
like a secret Citizen Kane or something like that.
Yeah, like this. Yeah, he was cooking this secret formula for the perfect film, and the producers snatched it away from him and chucked it to Joss Whedon for a quick buck. It seems incredibly unlikely that this will be a good film. But if it is a good film, that would be like kind of amazing.
Well, look,
it would totally defeat the odds. And if I could sit back and watch, an actually good Zack Snyder Batman Superman flick, then fuck it. But
I mean, yeah, when this comes out and it gets a 100 on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, I'm sure all the DC fans will be laughing at us, downvoting us, whatever it is, because I really hope that happens. Honestly, if this comes out and it's actually good, that would be the ideal situation. But I'm kind of in, like, for me personally, it's a win-win, because if it's terrible, I get to laugh at another terrible DCEU film, and if it's great, then I get a great film. So
exactly. Perfect.
My one hope is that it's not really boring. If it's going to be like 4 hours long, I'm really worried it could be just like an absolute slog. I
mean, but it's a hard one to balance, because if they add more to character development, like for instance there were characters like Cyborg and Flash that got fucking no introduction. We've now had like, and you could see there were parts of like the trailer, or there were things hinted at, I'm sure, along the way, particularly with Cyborg, that they definitely cut out. Like there were like shots of him as just like a normal, a normal bloke before whatever accident befell him.
Yeah.
He just kind of enters the film as the Cyborg already.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's certainly stuff that a longer film could achieve that would potentially benefit it. But if it just gets caught down in loads of boring, like, minutiae of just like, oh, here's another funny little characters interacting, or some pseudo deep fucking flashbacks like in Batman v Superman, where it was just like all the most interesting parts of the film didn't really happen and all that crap.
I mean, ultimately, it is basically just going to be the same film, mostly recolor graded. And
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like that was the main difference, really. A lot of people were picking out from the trailer was that in the original Snyder trailer, it was like dark blue for the finale, the bit where they're like driving into like a deserted town.
Yeah.
And then in the Whedon cut, it's orange.
I think the basic summary of this is that it's cool, but you can't polish a turd. It's already a bad film.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much you can, spin the same material with new colours and maybe some extra stuff into something great.
But actually, you know what? Something we haven't mentioned, actually, just to quickly finish on, is there were actually, the actors themselves were campaigning.
Yeah, that was amazing. Like Ben Affleck tweeted, like Ben Affleck, the Snyder Cut. I want to know what happened behind the scenes for that to happen. Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Yeah, thinking about it, because I was saying earlier, Ben Affleck's jumped off this project. He's done with it, and obviously, he's got his whole alcoholism thing. He's going through some shit. But also, like, starring in Batman v Superman and expecting it to be such a hit, and to try and ingratiate yourself with those fans, and to be cut down so aggressively must have been soul destroying.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that was the angle. Maybe he was like, look, if there's something that can save my reputation out there, like maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe he's like, he was there for a start, and he was like, yeah, I remember doing all these great scenes, and none of them fucking turned up.
Yeah.
In the final cut. So
yeah,
maybe him saying that.
I guess if you're on your 5th reshoot,
evidence in of itself.
If you're on your 5th reshoot doing a weird variation on a scene you already feel like you've nailed like twice, that's going to be annoying. So maybe that's why he's so off. But yeah, should we move on to our next bit? Okay, so Extraction is a 2020 film released on Netflix, as I mentioned earlier. It's like an action film with obviously Marvel star Chris Hemsworth. General star now. I guess he's been in loads of big films. He's not just Thor at this point. And more interestingly to me anyways is the fact that this is directed by Sam Hargrave, who was a stunt coordinator on Avengers, the original Avengers, and ended up being the overall stunt coordinator for the MCU, which is obviously pretty impressive. Marvel has lots of good action scenes, and he shines through on this. So yeah, what did you think of Extraction?
Well, I think I should first preface that I kind of went into this film totally blind. I watched it kind of on your recommendation. I'd seen it was getting kind of average reviews. I thought, oh, it's another like Netflix action film, or just I've never I'm never hugely excited when I see Netflix original written up on the screen.
With good reason.
As many people are, it's not necessarily their specialty. But, how do I put this? My overall opinion of it is that it is a pretty bog standard action film, doing very minimal things to try and set itself out from the crowd. I think it borrows massively from films like John Wick, and maybe a bit from like stuff like Upgrade with some of the weird camera stuff and action scenes.
Yeah.
But its story is incredibly bland. The characterizations, particularly of Chris Hemsworth's Tyler, is super
Tyler
boring.
Rake.
Yeah, Tyler Rake, like fuck off. But something I was going to say was, I had no idea any of that stuff. I had no idea about its ties with Marvel, with the Russos and Sam Hargrave. I started watching it and I was like, oh shit, it's set in India and Bangladesh, or that region of the world.
Yeah.
And and the amount of like of Hindu and Bengali in it was kind of, it led me to assume, without knowing any of the other stuff, that it was actually like an Indian,
like a foreign language
film that they'd just gotten Chris Hemsworth in because he had the star power.
Yeah.
So I kind of watched the whole film with that mindset, and I was like, oh well, I think I was kind of more lenient on it for that reason. Like, and then having finished it and then seeing the credits of going, wait, the Russos, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Then I suddenly started reevaluating things. So I thought I'd mention that first, just to like preface. If I'm a bit too positive or whatever, it's because I had no fucking clue what I was watching, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of like reminded me of like a modern take on almost like an 80s action film, like Commando or like Rambo 3. Or like any of the like an 80s James Bonds, where it's essentially the premise of it is you get a Western white action hero going to an exotic location, and that's kind of like where most of the that's the appeal of it, is like you have this Western audience insert character going somewhere cool and unusual to Western audiences. I kind of appreciated the aesthetic of it. Like, it was almost, there's been like this Call of Duty film that's been in pre-production forever, and it kind of felt like it.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely had that.
Like, it's kind of like maybe the best version of that we could get, but at the same time, like, I just had so many problems with the writing and the story. Even though it had strong elements, particularly the action, which we'll come to, I'm sure, and I thought the performances were generally pretty solid for a film like this. Like,
they were solid, yeah.
Yeah.
Unexceptional is what I would say. I mean, apart from maybe some of the, I think that the kid, the Indian kid in it, he was pretty good.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, like, expectations are pretty low with kid actors. I don't like. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't like dunking on child actors. Obviously, it's tough to be that good at something when you're young. But he was definitely better than a lot of the American actors you'll see doing child performances in big blockbuster films like this. He did well. I did think Chris Hemsworth was kind of carried a lot of the film, in that obviously there's not much writing to back up his character, and I think he did a really good job of doing like an admirably subtle job of this whole depression trauma thing that his character has going, and obviously his physical performance was really good. Like, you can tell that he put a ton of work into really seeming like he is this ultra efficient black ops badass, and I thought him, and also what's his name, his name's Randeep Hooda, the guy who plays his sort of counterpart, who I believe is actually...
the guy chasing him down.
Yeah, I thought he was really good as well.
Was cool.
Obviously, same situation with Chris Hemsworth, where it's like, obviously the writing's pretty flat and there isn't much for him to go on, but again, he gives a really good physical performance.
You know what? Your comparison to Rambo, I realised in my notes that I wrote down Indian Rambo whenever I saw his character.
Yeah, he was good. It was good to see. Like, I never felt... I mean, obviously, same situation with Chris Hemsworth, where it's like, obviously the writing's pretty flat and there isn't much for him to go on, but again, he gives a really good physical performance. You know what? Your comparison to Rambo, I realised in my notes that I wrote down Indian Rambo whenever I saw his character.
Yeah, he was good.
I mean, there's the whole white savior aspect of it, where like Chris Hemsworth is ridiculously overpowered compared to everyone else. But I was kind of okay with it in that they matched him with that guy, and he kind of does struggle against him a bit. I do kind of feel like there was a massive wasted opportunity in not pairing them in some way and have them like play off one another.
Because there is a moment where they kind of collaborate, for want of a better word, but they're never like together. They're kind of coordinating something rather than you know doing the sort of back to back gunslinging.
Yeah, like the premise of them like having a fight.
With the film.
The premise of them having a fight early in the film and then kind of later realizing they have basically the same goal and collaborating. That's kind of cool to me. And if the film was better written or allowed them to actually interact with each other more, that would have been nice. It's a real shame to me that they didn't do that, or at least something more compelling than what they did, where they fight once and then have a collaborate. I mean, I'll try not to spoil anything, but have a collaboration towards the end where they're not really interacting in any meaningful way.
Yes, and I would also stretch that to the main villain of the film, who again I think does quite a compelling job. He is quite menacing without having to do a lot. He's not like this imposing stature like Chris Hemsworth, but he's got this kind of like. He's also not too overtly evil looking as well.
He's kind of like a.
He's not all hunched over.
Kind of like a playboy drug dealer.
Yeah. And I thought his performance was subtle enough and imposing enough, but the characters never really meet. There's no real point where they where Chris Hemsworth knows what he's up against, or has a face to face where it's I'm gonna take you down, bitch. It's kind of a goofy, over the top action / war type film anyway. So I don't know why they wouldn't lean into more of those sorts of elements more. They it felt like they were pulling back from going full throttle with it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. The direction is, again, I would say admirably subtle and restrained, but maybe to potentially a fault in spots, because this is a ridiculous action film and there's very little in the way of humor or extravagance. It does feel like maybe it's needlessly gritty. Which I mean works given the setting and all that, but I don't know, maybe just a bit more fun.
Your earlier comparison to Call of Duty, it carries that kind of mark and aesthetic with it through absolutely every kind of element, really. Down to the fact that it, for the large part, takes itself a bit too seriously. There's no, much like in Call of Duty, there's rarely moments of levity, apart from some shit banter between the NPCs and gives a fuck about.
It did kind of feel like that in a way. The characters did kind of feel like that, interacting NPCs, and a lot of the character interaction is given over radio comms, which is kind of like a Call of Duty game.
Yeah, for sure. It does feel like a guy completing missions. Rather than, and I think in terms of the way they structure it, so heavily around action scene, then sort of downtime where nothing much really happens, very minimal conversation, minimal character development. Even if the acting is somewhat good and you do get a little bit further, you never really care that much. Whereas when the action is happening, where the infamous, the famous scene, I guess, that we'll probably get on to talking about. Once you get to something like that, it wins your attention instantly. Your eyes are glued to the screen. Then there's the downtime afterwards, and you're like, okay, right, when's the next bit gonna happen? Then
before we move on to just praising the action, which we will do soon, I just wanted to mention the intro kind of sets a lot of the issues with the film across kind of quickly to me, because it opens and it shows the child being abducted and his relationship with, I think the character's name is Saju, the guy played by Randeep Hooda.
Yeah, Indian Rambo.
Which immediately kind of made me a little bit confused, and I didn't really understand. So his relationship is that he's looking after the child while his father, who is an Indian drug dealer, I believe.
Yeah.
He is looking after this child while he is in prison, and this guy is he's like a badass, and he's living away from his family who he misses. Blah blah blah.
Right. Yeah.
So. But for me to be kind of invested, you don't ever see Saju or the child, who I forget the name of, interacting in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
You don't get the sense that you get like a slight sense that the characters are slightly antagonistic towards each other. Like he's the babysitter, and he doesn't really like him because he comes home late from school, and he's like, "You're supposed to come straight home." And not hang out with
giving
your
him
friends."
like a school.
And that's.
Whatever.
And then he sneaks out to a club and gets abducted immediately. So like I'm not sure for later on when Chris Hemsworth is getting the child back. Surely the more interesting conflict would be to have the child at least somewhat fond of Saju. So then he's kind of conflicted as to whether he should get saved by Chris Hemsworth or Saju, or at least have some kind of conflict there.
Yeah, it felt like they were hinting towards it, and then they never really committed to it. They were like he sees Saju when that character first reveals himself, and he's like, his instant reaction is to sort of respond to the voice, and Chris Hemsworth is like, "Nah, if I can get down, you'll get shot in the head or some shit."
He says like, "I'll kill you both if you don't."
Yeah. So it's like they instantly kind of introduce an element and take it away, because whilst it's fine to have Chris Hemsworth say that, they never come back to a point where it's like actually something that still affects the character at all.
Yeah, and
like
that's
he's instantly happy.
That's something that could have played into it if they did actually team up in any meaningful way later, where it's like, who is responsible for this child who essentially has an absent father figure thing. But anyways, we'll get into the action. So, the main thing that I think a lot of people will mention when they talk about this film is the fact that there is this absolutely ridiculous fake one-shot sequence where it kind of goes from a car chase to hand-to-hand gunfights in an apartment complex, back to a car chase and more hand-to-hand and a big explosion at the end, of course. And I have to say, it was easily for me the best part of the film. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure. I think there were elements of the climax that got close, but it wasn't as consistently engaging as the one take was. Yeah,
like the what was really impressive about it, obviously, like, it's kind of a trend at the moment to have like a big sort of craftily edited one take looking sequence in films. Like with Atomic Blonde and I guess John Wick. I can't really think of any. I feel like I've seen quite a few do it, and I can't really name any off the top of my head. But it's kind of like something that is coming more in vogue ever since John Wick. Obviously, another stunt coordinator directed film. I guess they actually understand these things and how to shoot it and make it look good. And it really was like the best part of the film. I mean, it had like a really good sense of like geography. Like I was never confused where a character was. It wasn't. It didn't get boring. Like in the Atomic Blonde one take, it kind of feels like the characters are getting too tired to keep going.
Right. Yeah.
And I did kind of. It's the only point where I kind of like the concept of Chris Hemsworth character and that he's so depressed about his past that he doesn't have any sense of self-preservation, so he's almost more deadly in that.
Right, yeah.
Which, he's so
more committed to the action.
Yeah, like he's fighting
wild shit.
He's fighting so hard he wants to get killed, which I think could be compelling in a film, but it kind of never really delivers on it in any meaningful way. Like they have a bit earlier on in the film where someone's holding a gun to his head, and he doesn't flinch when they pull the trigger, and he doesn't get shot, but he makes the joke, "Oh, there's no magazine in the gun." Which kind of undercuts that again. It's a funny moment, but I don't know. The action is consistently good. I will say that though, this is kind of spoilery. I wasn't a huge fan of the final bridge sequence. It was okay.
I think my main problem with it, as I was kind of sort of covering earlier, was, in fact, I don't think I finished the point I'm thinking about it, is that
I interrupted you.
This. No, it's all right. No, I just realised that my trail of thought probably went nowhere. Anyway, the villain they have in the film, this sort of drug kingpin that's trying to stop the two of them leaving the city, he never really interacts with Chris Hemsworth at all in the entire film. I don't think they share a line of dialogue, in fact. And so when you have that final action scene, which is essentially a confrontation between the two parties, a lot of it is, baddies sat comfortably over in the distance sending goons in to stop them from leaving. Again, spoilery, I suppose. And then the good guys largely towards the end I guess they come in, but again they're sort of off in the distance. It's kind of they've got their two groups of mercenaries battling it out, but the people with the high stakes kind of they stay separate from one another.
Yeah,
and that's never really resolved or addressed, and the film just kind of sort of ends with none of that tied up.
At this point I want to give a spoiler warning because I want to say something that annoyed me about the ending. So
Sure.
Spoilers from this point onwards.
I guess spoilers from
I kind of hated that they killed Saju in such a cheap way. So basically,
right,
the Indian guy who's trying to protect the child at this point on the bridge, like you say, like all the bad guys are off in a distance. He gets sniper shotted through the head,
right,
making me way less interested in the Extraction 2 that's coming out. I don't know if it's going to be a
well,
prequel or sequel.
they've actually got an Extraction 2 already?
Yeah, already, because apparently this film has absolutely blown Netflix records out of the water. Probably, partly down to the quarantine thing.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, yeah.
So it instantly makes me less interested in that. And also, like you say, it's kind of like, it really is, it is kind of like watching a Call of Duty playthrough in a way, because it's like, in a Call of Duty game, you kill a lot of NPCs. You don't really interact with a lot of the characters apart from with dialogue. And then someone literally, almost literally off screen, in that they're in a different area, snipes this guy, and it's like, well, okay, so that's how he dies. Brilliant. Yeah, and it really just feels wasted. Like there's no character stuff going on whatsoever.
For such an interesting character, like potentially he is the most interesting character on screen. Like because of how little they give Chris Hemsworth's Tyler. I mean, I just can't. For a start, I just can't think of him as Tyler. Right? Yeah, he's just Chris Hemsworth.
He's Chris Hemsworth
doing. Yeah. He's just Chris Hemsworth doing a deep gravelly voice, and he's sad. That's kind of it. Mm-hmm. It just feels so minimal character-wise. But Saju is so much more compelling. They give him a lot more. They don't give him much time, but they give him some time with the family that he longs for, and there's a lot more of his character is spent kind of.
I guess he's supposed to be the counterpoint to Chris Hemsworth in that he has a family.
I guess. Yeah, I guess they have similar backstories, but still. Regardless, yeah, Saju does feel like one of the most fleshed out characters in the film. He's also a total badass. He's really cool, aesthetically and just with like the action he's capable of. So yeah, to have him, yeah, you're right. It is a cheap way, and I guess I hadn't properly thought of that thus far, like until now. Just how kind of unsatisfying that moment is. Especially like you say, he's not killed on screen. It would be or by a character on screen. It would be really cool, or would have been really cool if
maybe they should have like fleshed out the bodyguards of the drug dealer. In some way.
Maybe he keeps. Say the guy with the sniper, who's like the general, the military general, that's like under the thumb of the drug kingpin. If he was sniping, ran out of bullets or something, it was like, fuck it, I'm going in mano a mano, and he they fucked up, like the good guys have fucked up all the mercenaries. They're like, oh shit, we've got no one left, and he's like, I'm still here. He puts on like some fat fucking like bulletproof vest thing, like gets like
get one of those juggernaut suits from Call of Duty.
Yeah, some fat, yeah, exactly. Go full Call of Duty with it. Grab 2 12-gauge shotguns or whatever, just fucking blast in, and then if he dies, and the two of them like kill each other, as like the kind of a climactic moment, that could have been sick. Yeah. Because there wasn't much of a climax to the bridge bit.
I guess the climax is him. So Chris Hemsworth's character, he gets shot and jumps off the bridge. I guess that's the climax.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel climactic.
I know what you mean. In terms of action, right? In terms of, there's a moment where a helicopter gunship comes in, starts blasting them with some really high caliber rounds. And maybe explosive rounds, and it shit is going loose. But then that problem gets taken care of pretty quickly. And so you have this one moment of, oh shit, it's gotten even bigger, it's gotten mental, and it's like, and then it dies back to where it was before, and it just feels a little bit like, especially considering what you've already presented us, sort of at the end of like the first third of the film or something with the one take. Yeah, it does feel quite just underwhelming, I suppose. Yeah.
I also wanted to touch on another action sequence which really confused me again. It's a very well executed action piece in that you can see all the hits, bodies are flying around, sound design's pretty good, well made, but I do not know what it was supposed to be for, or actually do. Is the bit where Chris Hemsworth is attacked by a bunch of is it Bangladeshi? Is it set in Bangladesh?
I can't honestly remember. I think it's like either a border town, or it's either an Indian town with a lot of Bangladeshi influence, or opposite way around. Basically, I can't quite remember.
But
actually, no, I think it might be Bangladeshi, because I think it's like a Bangladeshi kingpin that kidnaps an Indian kingpin's son.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm just going to quickly look this up.
Forgive our ignorance if we confuse the two. We do apologise.
Yeah, I promise I'm not racist. Yeah, it is Bangladesh. But so basically, a bunch of street children attack him, and then there's basically this 2 or 3 minute sequence of Chris Hemsworth beating up children in a pretty brutal manner.
That was one of my favourite scenes.
I mean, it was funny to me.
Brief.
I really enjoyed it in that it was hilarious to watch Chris Hemsworth beat the living shit out of some kids.
I couldn't tell if it was a bit tone deaf or not. If it was supposed to be funny.
The thing that kind of soured it for me is this film has a weird preoccupation with violence against children. There's a couple of I mean, I'm not one to think of the children, throw my hands up in the air, and my sensibilities about this, because there's loads of really brutal, horrible films that I love and I don't have a problem with, as long as there's a point to it. But this film does have this weird preoccupation with violence against kids.
I guess it seems only to hammer home the point that the baddie is really aggressive.
Really
there's that
bad.
bit. Because he's gonna cut one of the kid's fingers off for speaking out or talking back, and then the first thing you see of the bad guy is he gets one of his goons to throw a kid off a rooftop.
Yeah, and there's the bit where the police officer that comes and kidnaps the kid, he just executes.
Oh, he just fucking
Which I as I said, I'm not oh no, you can't do that. You can do that. It's just it felt so why? It was just so out of nowhere.
Yeah, a bit gratuitous.
And then you have this scene where I understand, I kind of respect the plot line of this kid that's becoming ingratiated with the horrible mob boss and is trying to prove himself.
Yeah, he was a cool character. I liked him.
He was a cool character, but again, just completely underused, and he then tries to get Chris Hemsworth as an act of revenge, and Chris Hemsworth is just beating up these small brown children. I was like, why? I don't, because the film is so po-faced for much of it. I just wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel or what the purpose of it was.
It was very satisfying though, because they tried getting the jump on him, and he uses loads of environmental stuff to fuck with them. He uses a car door quite a lot, which was really fun.
He crushes a child's legs with a motorbike.
Oh god, he does. Yeah, it's pretty fucking horrifying if you think about it for too long.
I mean, as I said, it's really well done.
Because it does have a kind of goofiness to it, I guess, because of it seems so extreme to do these violent things against children that you can't help but think, oh, this must be a bit of a joke. A bit of a comment on how dark it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, I also just wanted to touch on, I guess the only major thing that we haven't touched on, we'll just touch on it briefly, is David Harbour's appearance.
Yes.
Which is kind of a little side quest. I don't know about you, but the moment he showed up, I kind of guessed where it was going. It felt so obvious to me.
I guess I didn't. I got just kind of caught up with the fact he was even in the film. Again, another thing I wasn't prepared for. And I do love David Harbour. I know me and you don't necessarily see eye to eye on Stranger Things.
I think he's a good actor, though.
I think, for me, he's my favourite character in Stranger Things. He's kind of, for the first couple of seasons at least, he was what I was watching it for.
Yeah.
And
no, I get it. Yeah.
So yeah, just seeing him involved was great. But yeah, I guess once it's revealed what his intentions are, that he kind of wants to sell the kid back.
I just didn't buy the whole bit where they're you need to drop the kid. I just didn't buy it. It felt like such a weird...
kill the kid?
Yeah, because they didn't say... They didn't
necessarily
say kill him, but I do remember the woman calls him up and says...
He said that they were going to do... Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
Because she calls him, and then David Harbour's like, "Yeah, why don't you just sell the kid back and you can get loads of money."
So and then sell the kid back, and then just kill the kid because killing the kid would be way more merciful than what the baddies were going to do to him.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't really care for that scene at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just that I guess where it was going. It's that the idea that Chris Hemsworth, they basically do what gave it away for me was that they do like one little bit of heart-to-heart dialogue between Chris Hemsworth and the kid, which is perfectly finely acted. And I was like, okay, so now that they've done this, I know, and David Harbour's character is somewhat sus. Right. I have a feeling I know where this is going, and I think he's gonna, he's in with it or something, and then it happens. And I don't know. Again, it's just an issue with the film where the actual thing that's presented is perfectly.
And there's quite a cool fight between them because again, it's like with Tyler's match with Sarju, they're quite evenly matched. The same goes with him and David Harbour. Mm-hmm. David Harbour is largely besting him actually for a bunch of that fight. Cause,
he does actually beat him, doesn't he? And then the kid comes in.
Yeah, he does, and then the kid walks in. Because, well, one, David Harbour's an absolute fucking unit. He might have a dad bod, but I respect him on that level. I feel like that's the kind of physique I'm going for,
Again, maybe it's one of those things where like the film is so preoccupied with not having the characters really interact that much. Maybe, why wasn't David Harbour, like, in on the mission? And then you could see them fight together, and then when he eventually proposes this, it would actually feel like a betrayal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That seems like such an obvious thing to change, right?
Yeah.
Just have those characters interact for a little bit longer, but everything's so isolated and pieced out. And that, I guess, again, that's why it feels like Call of Duty, because everything it's all for like the sense of reveal. Yeah. But it's never but it feels so singular when he's doing his mission. It's like you are in the game like, oh, suddenly there's no dialogue. I've got to kill a bunch of NPCs. All right, now we've got the cutscene. That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah,
it feels 100%. Like cutscenes and action between them.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, no, I can't agree more with that. It really does feel like a Call of Duty movie. So, like, what would you rate it?
I'd probably go like a decent 5 out of 10. Like maybe a 5.5 if I'm being very generous. I would say performances were fine. Location was quite interesting for me because I don't see much cinema from that part of the world.
I feel like between Chris Hemsworth and the location, that's two things that really carried it.
Yeah, for sure. It was the location was gritty. It's a side of Indian Bangladeshi culture I've not seen before. I know Indian movies in particular are on the cusp of blowing up in the West, and yeah. I'm sure films like this will help tie that across. In fact, that's kind of why I thought this was just an Indian film with Chris Hemsworth attached to it, because I thought it was like trying to promote the cinema of the country. But regardless of that, it has strong elements to it. The action is very compelling, but everything else is so grey. The story is so bland. Characters that have some elements of interest are never fully capitalised upon. Like Chris Hemsworth's whole backstory where his kid passed away, all they ever touch on, all they ever do is have this like vague, like blurry filter on like some family fucking
it's
video
literally the most
from
cliche
like
thing.
It's so cliche, and they never even take the filter off. Normally in these films, if you're going to do the cliche thing of having that scene, you then have the later on where he remembers more of it, and like suddenly it's all clear to him. He's like, oh wow, yes, I remember my son. I've let go of my past and I can remember him fondly now. Yeah. And they didn't do that. What would you give it? I
feel like I'm a bit meaner because this film really frustrated me in that I really love like a good bit of it. In that I'll probably go back and like watch these action scenes again on YouTube because they're really well done. I really like the opening confrontation with him and the drug dealers.
That's cool. Yeah,
even in terms of character, that's actually pretty solid. Him kicking people through walls looks cool, and the violence is well done. But I can't really forgive it. I'd give it like a 4 or 4.5. Like, damn. Just because there's no amount, a film that ends that weak to me, like a good ending.
That's
is
something
quite
we haven't.
Crucial
that's
for
something
me.
We haven't really talked about. Just as a final thing, I think should be the very end of the film.
We did mention that he jumps off the bridge. That is the ending, isn't it?
But there's the wrap up bit afterwards where it's just playing the music, and the implication is that he survives even though he's taken 100,000 fucking bullets at that
and
point.
fallen in like a filthy river.
It's like kind of cool, in so much as like the music playing. There's no dialogue. That the music used is quite beautiful. However, I've realised it is totally ripped off from Inception. It's literally temp music of time.
Oh yeah. There's loads of films that have done that. I can't think of what they are.
I was thinking, wow, this is a really emotive piece of music. Oh wait, it's by a way more talented composer who himself often rips off other people anyway. But that's another story for another time.
Normally himself.
I just thought there was two cop-outs in it. One, they didn't commit to Chris Hemsworth's death because the implication is that he's alive at the very last shot.
Mm-hmm.
And two, they have the main villain of the film getting killed off in a totally unrelated scene where she just turns up in a bath, like one of the good guys who's sort of working on the intel. She turns up in the bathroom, shoots him in the head, and it's just like brilliant. Like what was the fucking point? Like,
yeah.
If you're gonna do a sequel, just have him turn up in the next fucking film.
Well, I mean, I guess we don't know. It could be a prequel, so who knows? Okay, so for the second part of this podcast, I recommended Adam a film he hadn't seen before, but a film I had seen before. The film is Heat by Michael Mann. Came out in 1995. It's a bit of a classic. I don't know anybody who's seen this film who doesn't, kind of love it or at least like it. And I had actually seen it before going into this, as I said, and it was a film I wasn't massive. I liked it a lot, but I wasn't, in love with it. But as it sat with me, I was. Loads of it seemed to stick with me, so I was really, really keen to rewatch it. And I have to say, rewatching this was kind of a treat because I loved it. And I think, I have a feeling you have similar feelings. How did you like Heat on your first time watching Heat?
Man. Well, before I get into that, I think it's interesting that we were comparing Extraction to Call of Duty when you could so easily compare this to GTA 5.
Yeah, that's a good point.
As soon as they put on the masks in the first action set piece, I was like, oh fuck, this is literally like GTA 5 has like copied and pasted like a vast majority of this film into its own story.
I didn't even catch that. That's a really good point.
Because there's a mission in GTA 5 where they drive a truck into the side of into the side of an armored police truck.
Oh yeah, of course.
In order to flip it. So
I've seen this film and I played that game all the way through like 5 times and I've never caught that. That's a really good point.
But I mean, this film, it kind of left me speechless. It was absolutely fantastic on every single level. Like
is this the first time you've seen a Michael Mann film?
It's the first, it's my first Michael Mann film, which is kind of wild thinking about, like, looking over some of the, influential stuff he's made over the years. Like, just totally managed to escape my my attention before this.
I think what caught me about this film this time round, which maybe didn't catch me the first time round, is like how, obviously it's like a really slick, basically perfectly directed film, and all the technical aspects are excellent and all the performances are excellent, but like the emotional impact of it really struck me this time. Just like how wonderfully done all the character writing is, how complex it is, and stuff about balancing your personal life and your family life with something you're really dedicated to and something that you're really passionate about, and how those two things can impact one another. Like the particularly the final shot and the song that goes with it, and the final sequence in general is just stunning, and a lot of the like moments in it, it's almost like kind of like a Shakespearean tragedy in a way, like the way like the characters just seem doomed from the outlook, but you still care about them so much.
I think what's impressive about it, and I think what makes it stand out from so many other films is say, I don't know, a film like The Godfather, which you could easily compare it to, given the cast of both films.
And quality.
Quite. It focuses very singularly on basically a group of sort of anti-heroes, bad guys. It's like, here is this criminal hierarchy. They are presented to you as your protagonists, and, in spite of Al Pacino's you know, his reluctance at the beginning of the story, he gradually becomes the hardened badass that he ends up being.
Yeah.
But it's still quite a singular focus on, you know, one side of the coin. You never get to see, all right, what's the police doing? And I'm not saying it's like an exclusive thing about this film, but I think it's something this film does incredibly well, like spectacularly well, to the point of, you know, if you were to think of this kind of plot, of this kind of you know, cat and mouse, like two sides of the coin type film, Heat is surely up there, because, you know, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, whilst fighting completely different battles, both parallel each other so much in terms of, like you say, their dedication, their drive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's reflected in their personal lives, the interaction with the women in their lives, how, you know, slightly spoilering it, but not too much, I suppose. Al Pacino, you know, having issues with his wife. You know, he says it's like his third marriage, and you know, he can't keep being dedicated to a family because he's so dedicated to his police work. And then then Robert De Niro, on the opposite end of the scale, has no women in his life at all until a chance encounter with one woman. And so as one life kind of seems to be spiraling down, the other seems to come up, but then it kind of intersects. There's a kind of crossing over point, which is really interesting, right towards the very end of the film, which I won't talk about now. We'll probably do spoiler talk in a little bit. But it's a fascinating parallel, and I think it's integral to why you get the ending that we do get, and the fact that it's so clearly, delicately pieced together and deliberately ends in that way was just masterful. Yeah, honestly.
I mean, like the one thing that impresses me so much about it is that it never, you know, it has these like a cheaper film that's not as well crafted would maybe make one side way less likable. So like have Robert De Niro's character be way more evil, or like one of his some of his gang members way more likable. But what this film does so amazingly is you have the police characters who you're obviously sort of supposed to morally side with a little bit. I mean, obviously there's a lot of ambiguity. It doesn't ever go like, you know, these guys are the good guys, these guys are the bad guys really explicitly. But what I love about it is that you have this criminal element and the police element, and they're just almost, you're kind of rooting for both of them. So as like an audience member, it really puts you in like an interesting spot of conflict yourself.
So yeah, that's very apt. I remember thinking that particularly. There's the bank sequence again. I won't go into it, but you know, in this sort of cat and mouse moment, I couldn't decide who I wanted to succeed.
Which is
and
really
that was
fun.
Amazing. And I do think partially, obviously, writing is spectacular, but the casting is just next level. Like, how are you going to have a cast this fantastic?
Yeah, it's kind of like Robert De Niro to me is always his best when he's good at like some kind of like over the top performances. Like, but to me, he's always his best when he's really quiet and brooding. This film is like a perfect precursor to his performance in The Irishman, where he's kind of saying everything through his eyes, and like he doesn't emote that much. So when he does actually, when his character is forced to be in a situation, again, I won't spoil it, there is one real particular bit towards the end which I think is just incredible, but his performance is like really well restrained, and there's you can read a lot from him even though he's not doing a lot, which I think is like something only, you know, a once in a generation actor can do. And there's a reason Robert De Niro is Robert De Niro, and you know his name. And then Al Pacino on the other side is
so
like
unhinged.
So fun to watch. So many great quotables. I particularly like because she's got a great ass. And don't waste my motherfucking time. That was all of that. All of the Al Pacinoisms are brilliant.
He never so aggressive.
He never falls into like camp. He's just like unhinged, and you believe it because he's
just on the edge of it, because he's not doing it all the time. He like jumps into it, and it's in moments where he's trying to intimidate, like snitches and witnesses and stuff, where he's like fucking with them kind of, and then he brings it back to a place of like, you know, calm and introspection when he's interacting with his wife and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think that's what really humanizes him. Because if he was doing the campy, like, you know, shouting and swearing and like the whole film, then it probably would be a bit schlocky, you whatever. But
yeah, and I feel like I've seen stuff where he does go like a little bit too far over the edge, but he absolutely like he's perfectly reined in. Like all of his subtle moments are great. Another moment I love of him being a bit more sort of Al Pacino-y animated is the bit. I won't spoil it, but you can do this one spoilery thing, but you cannot watch my fucking television set. And then he smashes it.
Oh, that's great.
It's just so good. Every time he was on screen, it was like hilarious, and also like he nails all the serious stuff really well. I also just to talk quickly about like the technical aspects. This is kind of like a point for Michael Mann. One of his signature things in more recent films is his combination of widescreen cameras with like handheld digital cameras, which there's a little bit of this in. He leans on it much more heavily in his later films like Black Hat and Public Enemies, where there's a real obvious. He's using it to effect where you'll have like a digital camera shot for like maybe action scenes, slightly shakier, and then you'll have a lot of widescreen gorgeous shots. This has a little bit of it. In fact, I believe it also has like one bit. Again, I can't say which bit it is because spoilers, but there's a couple of bits where there's like even I believe like really early GoPro footage in this film.
Oh, I do recall there was one specific shot where I was like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but yeah, it suddenly cuts to like it's like attached to someone or something.
Yeah, to me this is like a perfect blend of that, because it's something like the bank heist sequence. You have like all these beautiful wide shots, and it's really well paired with these like handheld moving cams, and also just like the look of the film. You have like characters sat in spaces where the light in the background is really compressed, and like they're kind of it feels very intimate and like on a great scale at the same time, which I feel like is probably like a really high balance.
Massive, yeah, it seems like a massive precursor to me to like the Paul Greengrass films, like the Bourne films. Like, yeah, I'm getting that right. That is Greengrass, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Greengrass.
Yeah. Like just the that combination of sort of particularly the handheld stuff. Like I could see that being a massive influence on Greengrass.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was really struck with how pretty this film was. It not overtly pretty, not too overly stylish to the point of being distracting.
Yeah, because that would really betray the grit of it, but it doesn't do that.
It was very like there was I don't know, in most shots or most sort of scenes, it was able to capture the most sort of beautiful look of it. There's a lot of symmetry in a lot of shots. Just a really great eye for like the best way to make that shot look. And also I love the focus on the city, on Los Angeles, and always being in the background. It's on loads of the posters for it as well.
Yeah, like the environment plays like a really crucial part. Like the whole intro with the first hit they do, and like the CCTV, it really like it feels like a lived-in place. It's not just like a background element.
Oh, absolutely! Like the fact they live in Los Angeles is like so integral to the film, and and Los Angeles sort of famously a city of sort of your lavish wealth and crushing poverty. So counterbalancing that sort of side of things alongside having one character who's in the police force, prestigious, and then the other character that's like in the gritty underbelly was a nice way of putting it. A nice way of displaying it.
I guess it also works really well in the fact that like obviously LA is full of people trying to achieve big things. It's like a bunch of overachievers sort of stepping on each other to get over on one another. Like obviously in terms of the obvious element of that would be like actors and musicians all competing to do big things. It really works well as like a background drop in terms of a place for two characters who are trying to be the best version of a cop versus the best bank robber that they can be. Really, that also works really like thematically well. And in terms of like technical aspects as well, I just wanted to say the in the bank heist, I think the sound design is just amazing. Like the way apparently Michael Mann had the actors use guns with actual like blank rounds in it, and tried to mic it so that they wouldn't have to sort of like put in background like filler noises for the guns. So the reason the guns sound so like snappy and reverby when they're like shooting in the streets. Like a lot of the time you'll watch a film where they're having a gunfight in a street and it feels maybe like a little bit off because the gunshots aren't reverberating.
They've all been added in afterwards.
But they're like really deafening in that sequence. And
I remember that. In fact, I remember it being so much louder than like the rest of it. But and to a point where I almost thought something was wrong. But I soon realised it was like it added so much weight to what they were doing. I was so much more horrified by the fact that they were having this gunfight in the middle of like a civilian population surrounded by people, where so many other films have done similar things, and I've not had that sense of horror put into me. It's amazing how something as often sort of brushed aside as sound design, can be so integral, that final key ingredient in really hammering home just how important a scene is, or how emotive it can be.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I also just a real like nitpicky thing I have with a lot of films, particularly action films, where there's something intense going on, is like a lot of films insist on playing like really loud music over the top of something that's already really loud happening, and I'm really glad that when they do use music, there is some music over action scenes, but like I'm pretty sure the opening part of the gunfight is like pretty much music, because you don't need music over something that's already loud.
I think like it stops. I think they have music that's like building as there's like tension
They're
forming.
like getting into the car,
and then suddenly like the sound snaps out as soon as they're spotted, and like the gun, as soon as the first gun is shot, I'm pretty sure that the music's cut, and again that kind of that vacuum of sound where suddenly you know where you are, because there's a rhythm, there's a pace, there's like a progression. Suddenly it's all sucked out, and you're like, oh my god, what's going to happen? Like, there's no rhythm anymore, that anything could happen now.
Yeah, I love that. That was that particular sequence, and lots of other sequences in this film were just like so just like basically the best version of what you could have done for that scene. Like, just nailing it. Should we go into spoilers? Because there's quite a lot to discuss. So the climax of the film is like, it's hard for me to say it's the best part of the film, because
there's so many brilliant parts of the film.
Yeah, because like the bank heist sequence we were just talking about is in the middle of the film, and that's really iconic and brilliant. But I do just like absolutely love the whole thing where Robert De Niro can't tear himself away from not taking revenge on Wayne. His name is Waingro?
Waingro, yeah, Waingro.
So he goes back to the hotel and has to kill him, and then that bit where he's coming back out to the car, and he says, I'll be back, obviously, I'm not going to ditch you, to his love interest. And then he sees Al Pacino coming for him, and it kind of ties back into that piece of dialogue he says, where he says, there's the quote where he's talking to Val Kilmer's character in the film. Yeah, he says earlier in the film, he says, don't let yourself get attached to anything you're not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat coming around the corner, which then literally manifests itself at the end of the film with Al Pacino coming for him, and he kind of actually sticks to his original statement, but you can kind of see how horrified he is, Robert De Niro, at the fact that he's having to actually do it.
And the look on the woman's face, his Edie, is it?
I can't remember.
And where she's just like this absolute, stunned realization of, she's sacrificed a lot emotionally to bring herself to a point where she can leave with this, like, a mass murdering criminal who she's fallen head over heels for, and then he ends up leaving her. But what's brilliant about that is tying back to what I was saying earlier about how the characters parallel one another. As the relationship with Al Pacino and his wife deteriorates through the film, it hits a point where Al Pacino thinks he's kind of lost. He's assuming that Robert De Niro is going to go for Waingro, and
it looks like he doesn't.
And it looks like he's not going to, because he hasn't done it in the window they expect. So he gives up. He goes, fuck it, I'm out. Good game. I lost. I know when to quit. And in quitting, he discovers his stepdaughter, played by a young Natalie Portman, has tried to kill herself in his hotel room, which is maybe the most harrowing part of the film for me. Like, because I was so used to all the action and all the collateral damage, but it suddenly struck home just how real his, like, the impact of his dedication to his work was on his family. It just felt like it's really visceral, it hit very hard, that moment. Like
a similar element, a similar element of that I kind of love about the film is when he's in the hospital with his wife after he takes Natalie Portman's character into the hospital, and she's saying, you can go out and do this, because they have a big tiff where she cheats on him to try and get back at him for just constantly spending time on his job and not ever giving his family attention in any way, shape or form. And then she's like, you can go out and do it, and he says, no, I don't want to do it. And then she says, no, really, it's fine, like, I know you have a job to do and I know that's what you want. And then he kind of like bounces happily out of the hospital out to get Robert De Niro, because he's he's heard this tip off about where he is. And like the way he's just like so, because obviously he comes out a little bit better than Robert De Niro, who does die at the end of the film. You kind of get the sense that he's just doomed anyways, because he kind of bounces off happily to go and see do his job, and you can tell from the look of kind of anguish on his wife's face, like the despair on his wife's face, that like nothing's really changed. And that's it's amazing that his character kind of does a full arc, ends up in the same place, and it's still really compelling.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think there is another way of reading it that I kind of read into more, which is, like, sure, that it certainly doesn't end in a happy place, and he's certainly, like, he's not, like, fully changed his ways or anything, but he allows himself, that moment of kind of giving up and putting his hands up and saying, you know what, fuck it, I know when I'm beat. He finds Natalie Portman, and that's the only way he could have found her. If he'd have carried on at the police station, she would have been dead. Yeah. He is rewarded through that action by being able to save a life. And in doing so, he's kind of, his wife, for the first time, sees into his world. Sees what exactly he's been hiding from her this whole time. Why he doesn't want to share his work life and with his and mix it with his personal life. And so sure, she's heartbroken when he leaves, but at the same time he asks, or rather he offers to stay, which is something he's never done before.
Yeah.
He's never offered, it's always been pure work. And there's this sliver of hope for him at the end where he's like, maybe he has grown a bit, maybe he has evolved, and he's given his wife a gift that that can never be understated. He saved her daughter's life, and that's like such an important and emotionally powerful moment. And then if you contrast that with Robert De Niro's story, his story is kind of going the opposite way for the large part of the film, where he's closed himself off from everyone. He can't do it. He won't do it. He's got, he needs to be able to leave at the drop of the hat. And then he meets someone. They're getting closer and closer. They falter quite a lot after she finds out that he's a fucking mass murderer on the news.
Yeah, understandable.
But even at the end, after like consoling her and trying to make her understand, she comes back with him, and it's only at that very end point where he could give up. He could let go. He could carry on into the sunset with his wife, with his woman.
Yeah.
Or he could turn off the motorway and get revenge. And he gets revenge, which is the polar opposite of what Pacino did, if you think about it. Pacino gave up. He was like, fuck it, I know when I'm beat.
Yeah.
And Robert De Niro doesn't do that. So that when you get that scene of him having to leave her behind, and the kind of the close-ups, like what I liked is how the crowd moves around the car. Like, so she's like sort of stood, or she's like
parked in the car. No, I think she stays in the car.
She stays in the car and she just looks at him, and it's so static, her just horror, and then everyone, this chaos around them, like time stands still for her in that moment. It's just such like a sort of powerfully sort of depressing note.
Yeah, and then the final sequence where they're on the airstrip, and it's basically like an action sequence with only really like one shot fired once they actually get to that spot, where it's all dictated by Robert De Niro hiding, and then the light from planes flying over kind of illuminating them. That's just gorgeous. And then I love the final line where he says, "I told you I was never going back," where he's talking to where he's talking to He's talking to Al Pacino's character, and there's a lot of good music in the film. The score's really good. It's by Elliot Goldenthal, who's done some other really good scores. But there's also some really great soundtrack stuff, and the final song that plays is actually a song by Moby.
Oh, it is. Yeah,
it's so it's so well incorporated into the film that I honestly didn't know it wasn't part of the soundtrack until I tried to look up the soundtrack and couldn't find that song. And it's really well used, really emotional. The final shot's great with Al Pacino kind of like holding Robert De Niro's hand as he's dying.
Because they relate so strongly.
Yeah, exactly.
And in contrast, so actually, I will just mention just how visceral and brilliant of a concept it is to have your final action set piece take place in an airfield, on an airstrip, because there's so much danger. Like, I was worried some of them was going to just get killed by a plane just out of nowhere. I realised the film was too well written to just have a character die accidentally.
That'd be terrible.
It kind of got me in that kind of
it feels tense
state where I was like, oh shit, what's going to happen? Anything could happen here because there's so much extra shit happening around them that could interfere, and ultimately that ends up kind of being the case because. Al Pacino gets they're doing the cat and mouse stuff, hiding behind, I'm not sure what they are, some little buildings in the middle. I don't know,
they're like ventilators or something.
Yeah, air vents and stuff like that. And then the light from one of the planes going overhead betrays Robert De Niro's position by showing where his shadow falls, and that's what gives Al Pacino the jump. And
again, there's nearly no music in most of the scene until the final moment, which I like because it's gonna feel more tense if you're just hearing the footsteps and them moving around.
Yeah,
absolutely. It really puts you in their position. The
geography
of it's really clear as well.
Yeah, like I was saying, when the music is taken out, so too is the rhythm. I feel like
but it has its own cinematic rhythm of like.
No, it absolutely does.
Each other, which is more than enough to carry the scene, is what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. No. But what I would say is that, taking the music out of it, kind of there's a predictability with music where things kind of follow that rhythm. There's a comfort in it. Taking the music away removes the comfort blanket. The film follows its own rhythm from there, and you're along for the ride, and it's unpredictable. It's like jazz,
absolutely.
It's like fuck when they're gonna hit the next fucking note. Like I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Did you have any issues with the film? Because for me, someone saw someone describe this film as kind of like it's quite long. It's like 2 hours 50 minutes ish. So nearly 3 hours long. I saw someone really aptly describe it as like almost like a mini series condensed into a film, which I think it basically kind of is in a way.
I suppose,
like stylistically as well in terms of like a lot of the sort of soap opera-ish drama going on with characters. But the only thing I really have issue with is I think that just by virtue of it having so much in it and letting the characters breathe so much in between big set pieces, which I love as well because I can't stand it when a film is like really fastly paced just to get through and cover loads of stuff. Yeah. I do like that it lets the characters breathe and like just everyday stuff. But the only thing for me is that maybe like some of the character threads are just a little bit thrown in there. Like Natalie Portman's character is good, but I do feel like she's out of the film for a long time and then comes back. It doesn't go
far enough with her issues with her biological dad, which then causes her to, do, an awful thing, try and commit suicide. I would agree with you. They kind of throw hints in there, like some characters they just don't try and really characterize at all. They just kind of, they're just there. Like, actually, that's a very good point. Because you've got two ones that. In fact, no, three that come up to me quite quickly.
There's a storyline with Dennis Haybert as well.
Who's Dennis?
He's the black guy who ends up being the driver.
Oh, fuck. God. Oh, damn. You know what?
Which I thought he was excellent in it, because there's that bit where he has like the shit day at his new job, working in the cafe, and his wife is talking to him, and I think his acting in that is like a really great bit, because he doesn't quite cry, but you can tell he really wants to, which is always like slightly more impressive to me. I don't know.
No, I know what you mean.
Like,
God, this is an issue that
he just kind of gets capped, and I think this is
an issue that I had not thought about at all. Now you've mentioned it, and it's a can of worms, man. Okay, So you got him. I think Val Kilmer's more fleshed out of all of them. But what happens with him is you have this scene where he interacts with his wife early on, and then there's kind of a lot of. It doesn't really pay much attention to him. It kind of it chops in and out a bit. But I guess compared to what you were discussing with Dennis Habert's character, he gets loads of time. Waingrove barely gets any time if you think about it, because he gets his first thing where he fucks up the first heist and compromises it. He then randomly kills a hooker, and it turns out he's a Nazi with he's a serial killer Nazi with a fucking giant swastika on his stomach. And then he only comes up again at the end. So they're like, oh, there's a serial killer on the loose. Oh, well, no, actually, wait until the end. Then he'll get his just desserts. Who else? I mean...
The thing is, for me, like, it is kind of annoying to me that, like, they all kind of get brought in and then... It doesn't get resolved abruptly, but there's just a lot of time in between where they have to focus on the actual main characters. And then, like, for example, Dennis Habert's character, I absolutely understand the point of him being there and then getting abruptly killed, and then I understand the point of Natalie Portman's character having this depression and then this horrible suicide attempt. I completely understand why it's there. I just so it doesn't bother me that much, but it's maybe the only thing that's dragging it down from a perfect to basically perfect.
Yeah, I'd go with that. But yeah, it's one of those things you got to think about it retrospectively. It kind of slightly spoils it, but when you're along for the ride, it's it doesn't really affect it too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting what you were saying about being a miniseries though, because it's one of those films that, in spite of being nearly 3 hours long, I feel like I could watch plenty more of it.
I could watch it again right now, and I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, like literally, you could chuck another hour or two into it, and I'd be like, yeah, sick.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of gutted it's not 3.5 hours, because I think if you maybe gave it that time, you could maybe resolve some of those issues. Apparently, Michael Mann is kind of interested in doing like a prequel or like another film in this universe of like a younger Robert De Niro and
that'd be
Al
cool.
Pacino,
I guess he's got that
with, like, different actors. Now. I think that'd be cool. What would you rate this film?
Oh, easily a 9 out of 10. Easily, like it's just so. It's just wonderful. It's one of those magical movie experiences where you watch it and you're in awe of it constantly. I mean, if you hadn't told, if our audience hasn't been able to tell already, we're quite cynical. Yeah,
we're quite different.
Typical movie reviewer types who are very like. Looking at the details, picking it apart, trying to not, spoiling everyone's fun, basically. And this is one of those films where you just watch it and you can barely fault it, and you're just sat there. You've got that sort of the giddiness of a child again. I guess when you're watching a new film, you're watching a new film, you're always kind of chasing that feeling of awe and excitement. And this is the sort of film that reminds you why you do it in the first place. It's just an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, it's kind of like Michael Mann at his very best, Robert De Niro at his very best, Al Pacino at his very best, a great ensemble cast all doing brilliant jobs, and it all just comes together into like just pure movie gold. Just like one of those films that there is like only one version of it and ends up being super influential to like I do feel like I see like a lot of hints of this film in like TV series like anything with like Money Heist is like the new Netflix one, and there's so much of this film in that. And like any police procedural stuff I just that's like more modern, there's so much like of this film's DNA spliced into that now just inherently because it kind of defines heist films.
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's like the perfect example of a heist
like
film.
I was saying, like GTA 5.
Loads of games. Yeah,
GTA 5 being like the most successful, like one of the most successful products of all time. I
think it is like the most profitable product ever made.
Single product, yeah. Its fingerprints were all over that, and it exposed me to that. It was one of, again, like playing that game. I kind of knew it was referencing stuff, and but because it just had this powerful aura coming through it of like, wow, this is inspired. I wonder where that comes from. And having seen the source of it, like it's just like such a rewarding experience.
Yeah, I would personally rate this like a 9, but I could honestly see like in the future my issues with like some of the plotting and like side plotting being like reduced. I could maybe see myself giving this a 10 in the future because
I can see that. I can see that. Like it's pretty flawless. For the large part, outside of the character stuff with some of the support characters. And just one last thing I'd like to say about it, just in close, just to sort of compare it back to Extraction.
Yeah.
One great thing, one iconic moment in this film is where our two characters actually interact. There's the cafe scene.
Oh, how have we not mentioned that? Because that is like so good.
That's such an iconic moment where our characters are allowed to,
and it doesn't feel like a contrivance. Like it just kind of happens.
No, it doesn't. It does, yeah. Because I guess the setup for it is that Al Pacino feels like he's kind of got a one up on him. He's training him. He's put like trackers on all their cars and stuff. So he's kind of fucking with him. He's like toying with him. He's like, yeah, I've got you, but I don't even need to arrest you right now.
Yeah.
I can just have a little chat with you, let you go about your day, and I'll arrest you later. Because I've fucking got you. And it allows the characters to sort of see each other face to face and relate to one another. And there's instantly a chemistry between them. Like they instantly kind of show a respect and admiration for one another. And that's something so like frustratingly lacking in Extraction, and something that helps make this film so tense and engaging is once you hit that point, you're like, there is such a clear kind of war between these two characters of like they've incensed one another in that meeting. That they respect one another, but it only makes them more determined to take the other one down. Where in Extraction, there's none of that. There's no stakes of that kind of of that kind of level.
There's like it's an amazing moment in an amazing film where a scene is basically just two characters sat down at a table. It's the only real like direction is just like shot reverse shot, and it's like one of the most memorable and like just engaging films because it's basically just two elements of the film of the two characters that play off one another sitting down and discussing the fact that they're similar. If they're very dissimilar in philosophy and like in terms of their drive, they're so similar and they shadow one another in that way. And just those two just talking to each other in a cafe in a really casual way ends up being like kind of like one of the most engrossing moments in a film that's already so full of amazing engrossing moments. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, for that scene to stand so high amongst all of these amazing action sequences and witty one-liners and all these. Yeah, it's amazing, and but there's a stark contrast. Trying to look back. I mean, not that you could really ever compare this film to Extraction, but given that we've talked about them in the same discussion, I feel like a compulsion to do so. It's so clear what one film lacks when you have this sort of towering monument to film,
the golden standard, basically
stood next to it. Who knows? Maybe an Extraction 2 they'll enlist some help from Michael Mann. I doubt it, but I would love that.
I love that.
They could use
Extraction
it. Right?
2 directed by Michael Mann. That'd be brilliant. He's like 70 something. I don't know how many films he's got left in him. I probably don't want him to waste the time he's got left on fucking Extraction.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the sort of film we could be talking about for, we could do a fucking commentary on it. We could break it down second by second. It's so good.
We could go through, pause it on every good bit, and it would probably take us like 10 hours to go over what's so great about it. So I guess that brings us to the end. What film are you going to recommend for the next one we do for me to watch, and we'll discuss?
Well, I was kind of I'm torn actually. There was two films I was thinking of because this kind of gave me a bug for this film. Made me very nostalgic. This film came out the year both of us were born.
Yep.
and even though I was barely conscious enough to, and certainly I'm certain not being American, me feeling nostalgic for it is kind of unusual, but nevertheless I did.
It kind of reminds you of films of that time, doesn't it?
It does, and I just it really, I don't know, I really felt like a pang of like, oh man, to go back there, I know nostalgia's dumb, whatever, but still, I felt that, so I kind of wanted to go for something similar, and I had two films in mind that I have not seen, and I think you've seen both of them. I know you've seen at least, I think you've seen both. One was Casino.
Okay.
But I believe that's another 90s film. Am I correct?
It is. Yeah, I think that's also 95.
Again with De Niro and your boy Scorsese.
Yep.
Or not 90s. Actually, is it 90s or early 2000s? Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can, I believe, is 99.
Is it? Okay, another
1990. Let me double check that real quick.
But regardless, my reasoning for Casino was, Robert De Niro, 90s vibe, aesthetic, and that presence. And it's like a classic from that era that I've not experienced yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then for Catch Me If You Can, it's a huge film from Spielberg that I've not seen, which is I've got to plug that hole in my knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's another classic cat and mouse film.
Go on.
Maybe it's the most classic cat and mouse film if you think about it. Like, it's so archetypal, and I've just never fucking seen it.
So Catch Me If You Can was 2002, but as we know, the 90s didn't end until 2003.
That is a fucking fact.
Still a 90s film.
The 90s didn't end until Die Another Day came out. The greatest Bond film of all time.
And just single-handedly decapitated the 90s. I'm gonna make you choose. I don't want to choose which one you make me watch, so you're gonna have to pick one.
Okay, well, whichever I don't, I'll hold on to for the future.
Future one, yeah.
Oh man, fuck it! I'm gonna go Casino.
Okay, I was hoping you'd say that, but as much as I love Catch Me If You Can, I have seen both of them.
Yeah, I feel like Scorsese's gonna give me that grit that I want.
I think you're in for a good one. That's I won't spoil my thoughts on it, but
and that's one I know way less about because I know the vague story of Catch Me If You Can.
There's a lot to talk about.
Fucking nothing about Casino.
The great thing about Martin Scorsese's filmography is a lot of the films are very similar, but which is a criticism that actually gets levelled at Casino. But I think it's kind of like a good mirror of some of the other films you've seen of his. So it kind of works in how similar it is. You could almost see them as like an unofficial. I guess you could put it in the same boat as Goodfellas, Wolf of Wall Street, and maybe even The Irishman. But yeah, I'm definitely up for discussing that. So I will watch that. I don't know when the next one is going to be out. Let's say maybe like 2 weeks to a month.
Well, we won't make any promises until this boy's out because we we're learning the ropes. We're not professional editors or anything, so this could take a while. So we won't let you know when we recorded this. We'll say we recorded it yesterday. Just to make ourselves sound.
The date was yesterday when we recorded this. So.
Oh yeah, it was yesterday. Don't ask.
Yeah. Okay.
And what film from what more recent film we're going to cover? Do you reckon?
Well, I guess we'll leave that to be a surprise, mostly because I don't know.
Yeah. What even is out?
It could be some Netflix release. It could be Trolls World Tour. I guess we'll.
Oh hell yeah!
I mean, Trolls World Tour and Casino would be a brilliant.
That'd be. That's a perfect comparison. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess you'll have to find out. You'll have to listen to the next one to find out what we cover. I don't know because obviously there isn't much out, and there's only so much stuff available on the streaming. But there should be something, so we'll figure it out. I'll scan the options and see what's available to us. Hopefully, we'll do something different. We won't do another action film. We'll cover something.
We'll try and vary it up.
But yeah, okay. So next week we're watching Casino. If you wanna not be spoiled for it, definitely check out Casino. I can say it is a great film. So definitely just watch Casino, whatever you do. And Anything else? Or
don't forget to smash that like button or that.
I hate you so much. Okay, we'll cut it there. We'll cut it there. Going out on a high.